Every single year, we see players come out of nowhere and become big-time NFL draft prospects, and we also see players who have unbelievable hype in the offseason, but end up throwing away a lot of their stock and don't go where they originally projected. In today's video, I want to highlight 15 players whose draft stock fell during the 2021 season, quickly go through where they were projected, who they are, what went wrong, and where I see them going in the future. But right before we get into it, nearly 80% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel, and we're now on the road to 100K, so quickly be sure to do that. Smash that like button for the algorithm, turn on post notifications, and let me know another topic I can do in my next video. Now, let's get started. When it came to preseason NFL draft running back rankings, the top 5 was pretty much this: Chris Rodriguez from Kentucky, Zonovan Knight from NC State, Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M, Breece Hall from Iowa State, and Jerrion Ealy from Ole Miss. Ealy was ranked as the second best running back prospect going into this year, and many saw him as a guy who could both run the ball, catch the ball, and was an athletic freak. He was seen as a potential late first-round pick, but Ealy did not have a very good season. In fact, he only ran the ball 133 times for 768 yards and 5 touchdowns. Not only was he not ultra impressive as a running back, but he only caught 32 passes for 218 yards and 2 touchdowns. Overall in his Ole Miss career, he has rushed for over 2,000 yards and 20 scores, but his draft stock is seemingly day 2 or day 3 now, and when it comes to the top running back prospects, no one is really talking about Ealy anymore. I still expect him to get a shot in the NFL, but it's sad to see his stock dip. Coming out of Peach County High School in Fort Valley, Georgia, Kearis Jackson was a 4-star recruit in the class of 2018. In fact, he was a top 130 player and the number 23 wide receiver in the nation, and he had a pretty good first few years at Georgia. In 2020, he caught 36 passes for 514 yards and 3 touchdowns, and had emerged as a potential day 2 or day 3 draft pick. Because of that, he decided to come back to pursue both a national championship and a higher grade amongst NFL scouts. Going into this year, he was seen as one of those day 2 wide receiver prospects. He was ranked a top 50 prospect in the draft, and many thought he would emerge as a star with JT Daniels at the quarterback spot. Oh, how things have changed. To be fair, Jackson did battle some injuries, but he finished the 2021 season with 15 catches for 186 yards and a touchdown. No matter what he does in the national championship game, I cannot see that moving the needle for his draft stock, and now all of a sudden, it looks like it'd be a serious mistake for him to go to the draft. Maybe a team would take a late flyer on him, but going from a top 50 draft prospect to putting up numbers like this is a surefire way to make sure you go undrafted. I am a big fan of Kearis Jackson, and I definitely want to see him succeed in the NFL, but unfortunately, his stock fell. Zion Nelson has had one of the most up and down careers of any player I've seen. Coming out of high school, he was the number 114 offensive tackle, a 3-star recruit, and was barely ranked inside the top 1,500 players in the class of 2019. Miami took a chance on him, and it delivered. Nelson was a freshman All-American in 2019, continued to get stronger and better in 2020, and that's why, according to some mock drafts, he was a projected top 5 pick. In fact, when I was looking at a preseason mock draft, he was supposed to go number 4 overall. Zion Nelson's stock has dipped though. Recently, Pro Football Focus released their top 100 draft prospects, and he did not even crack the top 50. While he'll likely be a second-round pick, going from a potential top 5 selection to a day 2 pick is a potential loss of millions of dollars, and I think he is seen as more of a project player than someone who can come in right away and help. Either way, Zion Nelson has a very intriguing story, and I'm curious to see what happens to him in the NFL. This guy may have had the biggest stock crash of any 2021 NFL draft prospect. It's honestly really sad. Coming out of high school, Ty Freifogel was a 3-star recruit and chose to play for Indiana, a school not known for producing big-time receivers or even NFL draft prospects for that matter. In 2019, he emerged as one of the top receivers on the team as he caught 45 passes for over 600 yards and 3 touchdowns, but 2020 would be when he really made a name for himself on both the college football and NFL draft scene. Last fall, the Hoosiers would break out, and Freifogel was a major reason for their success. He caught 37 passes for 721 yards and 7 touchdowns. Because of that, he was named the Big Ten Receiver of the Year, was a 3rd-team All-American, and a projected day 2 pick. Freifogel was someone who could do a little bit of everything, but he decided he would come back to improve his craft and also help Indiana football have a great season. How did it turn out? Well, it was a complete disaster on both ends. Indiana football went 2-10 and became the most embarrassing Power 5 program in the country, and Freifogel had a terrible year. Yes, he did catch 46 passes for 500 yards, but he only had 1 touchdown, had a lot of drop passes, and compared to his stock last year, it has completely crashed, and at this point, I don't even think he will get drafted. It's really unfortunate to see because I really like Ty Freifogel, and if you want to see an entire breakdown and story about him, I actually made a video about him a couple weeks ago, and I will leave that as a link down in the comment section, so be sure to check that one out. Up next, we have our second Miami Hurricanes player on the list, and it is tight end Will Mallory. As I was looking through preseason mock drafts, they had the Chargers selecting Mallory with the 17th overall pick. They compared him to the next Greg Olsen, and while I understood some of the hype, it ended up falling flat this year. The 6'5" tight end ended up catching 30 passes for 347 yards and 4 touchdowns. Those stats will not pop off the page, and that is why his draft stock fell. To be fair, the quarterback play was very inconsistent to start the year, and his stats got better as Tyler Van Dyke took over as the quarterback, but it was the case of he didn't do enough, and he has decided to come back for the 2022 season. He went from a projected first-round pick to someone who has to wait another year for the draft. I like Mallory as a prospect for 2023, and I wonder if he'll be one of the best tight ends in America next year. We now have our first and last Alabama prospect on this list. His name was Jahleel Billingsley. After Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith went in the first round, Billingsley was seen as one of those guys who could break out, become a first-round pick, and was a hybrid wide receiver tight end. He was compared to Kyle Pitts, and after emerging late in 2020, there was good reason to believe Billingsley could become a first-round pick. Unfortunately, that's not how it played out. He was in the doghouse with Nick Saban to start out 2021 and didn't really have that great of a year. He caught a total of 17 passes for 256 yards and 3 touchdowns and became the second option at tight end behind Cameron Latu. There is still a chance Billingsley could declare for the 2021 NFL Draft, but at this point, I would see him as a day 3 pick. He has all the potential in the world, which could make a team take a late flyer on him, but he is not ready, and compared to all the hype he had, his stock has crashed. Just like Zion Nelson, Nick Broeker was expected to be a top 5 pick. In fact, in a mock draft, he was projected number 5 and was seen as the top tackle prospect according to some people. Broeker was a high 3-star recruit coming out of the state of Illinois and the number 35 offensive tackle in the class of 2019. When he arrived at Ole Miss, he didn't play immediately, but at 6'6" and nearly 300 pounds, Broeker would eventually make his presence felt, and he would emerge as a big-time prospect. I wouldn't necessarily say his stock has broke, but it also has not really risen or even stayed the same compared to the hype. As of right now, I've seen him as a late first-round pick or even a second-round pick, and he decided to play in the Sugar Bowl, and he will make his decision in the coming days. If he truly believed he was a first-round pick, and scouts were telling him the same thing, then it would not be a 50-50 decision on whether he would leave or not, and compared to being ranked number 5 to questioning whether you should come back or not, you could say his stock has taken a dip. NFL quarterback mock drafts are strange. In the preseason, we saw 5 different players get ranked as the number 1 quarterback prospect. We saw Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell, Kedon Slovis, Malik Willis, and even Desmond Ridder as potential number 1 overall picks. Kedon Slovis is the one we're going to be focusing on right now, as it is impossible that he is even drafted this year. He decided to transfer away from USC, and he will now head over to Pitt. Coming out of high school, Kedon was a 3-star flyer type player, and he lived up to all the potential in 2019. He had an historic freshman campaign, but in 2020 and 2021, his stock has taken a little bit of a fall, and he is not the same player he once was. Based on videos and comments I've read, it seems that many believe he was bailed out by all the wide receiver talent, and maybe that's true or maybe it's not. I think it's a combination of multiple things, but at the end of the day, Slovis will not be the number 1 overall pick this year, and I think he'll be a 2nd or 3rd round pick in the 2023 draft. We'll have to wait and see. The leading rusher in the SEC in 2020 was not Najee Harris, it was a guy by the name of Kevin Harris. The two Harrises dominated the SEC, as Kevin ran for 1,138 yards, 15 touchdowns, and averaged 6.2 yards per carry. He was part of the class of 2019 and came from Bradwell Institute High School, which is located in Hinesville, Georgia. He was only a 3-star player, but he had a 5-star impact. Because of the NFL rules, he was not able to declare after 2020, so he'd have to come back as a junior and prove it once again. Sadly, this only hurt him. He battled some injuries in the preseason and ended up 2nd on the team. He had a pretty disappointing year, finishing with 660 yards and 4 touchdowns, and his best performance of the year came in the last game against North Carolina. He had nearly 200 yards, and at least he went out with a bang. He recently declared for the NFL Draft, and right now, maybe he'll be a day 3 pick or he'll go undrafted. Maybe a team will take a chance on him based on his potential from 2020, but as of right now, Harris killed his draft stock with a pretty bad 2021 season. Switching over to South Carolina's arch-rival Clemson, they had a prospect who was supposed to go number 12 overall according to some mock drafts. This was in a preseason big board, and Ngata was expected to be a big-time wide receiver. He was in the class of 2019 just like Harris, but he was ranked a little bit higher. Coming out of Folsom High School in California, he was ranked as a 4-star recruit, the number 9 wide receiver, and the 52nd best player in the country. He decided he would go off to Clemson, where he immediately showed flash. As a freshman, he caught 17 passes for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns, and 2020 was extremely disappointing. He only caught 7 passes for 83 yards, but he did battle some injury, and he was stuck behind Cornell Powell and Amari Rogers. 2021 was going to be his breakout year, as I said previously, he was a projected first-round pick according to multiple mock drafts. He was pretty disappointing. He only caught 23 passes for 438 yards and 1 touchdown, and his career has been very underwhelming. He is definitely not going to be a draft pick this year, and I wonder if he's ever going to live up to all the potential he has. It seemed the battle for the number 1 overall pick was going to come down to Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell, both of which are going to be included in today's video. Let's first talk about Sam Howell. He had an historic freshman campaign with North Carolina, throwing for nearly 4,000 yards and 38 touchdowns, and he continued with a great sophomore year as well. Because of that, he was seen as a Heisman contender, a potential number 1 overall pick, and maybe even the best quarterback in the country. 2021 was pretty disappointing for Howell though. He only threw for 3,000 yards, had 24 touchdowns, and a career-high 9 interceptions. But I think the worst part about it is he didn't win a lot of games. The Tar Heels ended up going 6-7, even though they were projected to compete for the ACC title. Howell still likely to be a first-round pick, but compared to all the number 1 overall buzz he had, and the expectations for this season, you could say Howell's stock took a fall. Speaking of Mr. Rattler, Spencer Rattler's stock died in 2021. Coming out of Pinnacle High School in Phoenix, Arizona, Rattler was the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2019. He'd sit behind Jalen Hurts as a freshman, as they would eventually go to the college football playoff. As a sophomore and a starter in 2020, he would have a pretty solid year. While it was a slow start, Howell finished with over 3,000 passing yards and 28 touchdowns. Because of that, there was a lot of Heisman hype. Many believed he was the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, and overall, nothing was going to stop him. Well, he was stopped. In 2021, he had a very slow start, and was actually booed against West Virginia. Because of that, Caleb Williams came in and stole the spotlight, and Rattler was a backup from then on. He only threw for 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns, and he has since entered the portal, where he will try to save his career at South Carolina. Obviously, he is not going to be eligible for this year's draft, so he will not be taken, and going from number 1 overall to not being taken means your stock crashed. Sevyn Banks was supposed to be the next great Ohio State defensive back. He was part of the class of 2018 and was a 4-star recruit in the number 23 corner in the country. In 2019, he would get his first action as he recorded 11 tackles and an interception. In 2020, he was an honorable mention Big Ten player after he had 23 tackles and once again an interception. So why would he be ranked as the number 1 prospect? Well, there's actually a blog site as a candidate for the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, and it was because of his potential. There are certain traits that scouts look for in defensive backs in the NFL, and I guess Banks has all of them, but he has not been able to put it to the tape. This year, he has struggled with injury, and when he has played, he has struggled tremendously. And while a team will likely take a flyer on him, maybe even the late 1st round or 2nd round, his hype has completely fallen off, and honestly, he would be better off just coming back for another year at Ohio State. This reminds me of the Shaun Wade situation, and I really do wonder what is going to happen to Banks. Wake Forest has had some good wide receivers over the last 2 years. Guys like A.T. Perry and Sage Sherrod both blew up at Wake Forest. There's one guy who was supposed to be a day 2 selection. His name was Jaquarii Roberson. Coming out of Hentford County High School in North Carolina, Roberson was a part of the class of 2017. He was a fringe 3-star recruit, as he was ranked as the number 193 receiver and the 1,393rd best player in the class of 2017. He got off to a slow start in his first 2 years, but in 2020, he would break out. He had 62 catches for 926 yards and 8 touchdowns. Because of that, many were projecting him as a day 2 selection, and if he improved, put up better numbers, and showed some traits that scouts wanted to see, he could potentially move up. Well, 2021, I think he kind of stagnated. He did have 71 catches for 1,078 yards, meaning he improved in both of those areas, but he had the same amount of touchdowns, became the second option to A.T. Perry, and in this Wake Forest offense with Sam Hartman, I expected Roberson to do better, and I have now seen him labeled as a day 3 selection. While you could argue his stock hasn't dropped that much, it has sort of stagnated, and I thought he'd be better than he was. Last but not least, we have Ohio State defensive tackle Haskell Garrett. Coming out of Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas, Garrett was a top 100 player, the number 6 defensive tackle, and the 68th best player in the class of 2017. Garrett had a very high ceiling, and he would not get an opportunity to play much in his first 2 years. I mean, that was obvious. In 2019, he would register 10 tackles, but in 3 seasons with the program, he had still not registered a single sack. In 2020, he would have 2 sacks and a career-high 20 tackles, and the potential for him was there, but he would decide to return for his last year. Many believed he'd be a late first-round pick and someone who could blossom at the NFL level, but this year, he really hasn't looked that great. He did have 22 tackles and 5.5 sacks, but the spike in numbers just has not happened, and right now I'm seeing he is likely going to go in the 3rd or 4th round compared to the first-round buzz he had this offseason. While I think Garrett will transition to the NFL, you could say he hasn't put it all together yet. So yeah, in today's video we talked about 15 players who had a considerable amount of draft buzz this offseason, and they are guys whose stock has fallen or even crashed during the 2021 campaign. Be sure to let me know what you think. Who's a guy whose stock crashed in 2021? Who's a guy whose stock rose? And who is your favorite player or prospect for this year's draft? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. Smash that like button if you want to support today's video. Subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.